I think one of the most difficult things for families who have an alcohol use disorder in their family, someone who's an alcoholic in their family, is just day-to-day events, just things that would be seemingly normal for a regular family, and they become toxic-filled, drama-filled events where you have to bite your lip and really suck it up sometimes just to get through that particular event without it escalating into something full-blown, like the police have to come or the ambulance has to come because somebody's so intoxicated they're knocking on heaven's door. And I think one of the biggest events is just a basic event that I remember I used to have with my wife, and this is the first time seeing me again. I was married for 25 years, and unfortunately, my wife succumbed to alcohol use disorder a little more than 5 years ago. Going out to dinner, certainly near the end. The last 2 or 3 years, I actually elected not to do it because I realized, and you come to this conclusion that you're not actually going out to dinner. You're going out and she's finding an excuse to drink, and the dinner is secondary to getting alcohol, and you're in a situation where you can get alcohol. So you sit down and let's go over this. Again, please like, share, and follow. Comment. If there's lots of comments you can say on this video, that's for sure. I have a complete coaching program really designed to help the alcoholic and the family member. Click on the link. It's in the link tree. It takes about 45 minutes. We're going to do a deep dive into what's going on with you and your family. The call is free. The course is not. But I'm looking for people who want to change the direction of their life and reinvent their life so that they can get this disease and this malady out of their life forever. And I can remember there's this one location we used to go to. I live in Temecula, California, which is in Southern California. And there was this one restaurant that we used to go to. I mean, it was always fairly packed. But when you sat down, the first thing they asked you, like many restaurants, is, oh, would you like a glass of wine? Would you like a beer? And I would just kind of cringe because it was like, I just want to get some dinner, man. I don't want to deal with alcohol. And of course, she would say, oh, I just want a glass of wine. He goes, and usually we would go out because it was a special occasion, like it might have been her birthday or something, and that's the reason why I was putting up with it. Unfortunately, I would say, no, I just want a soda. She would get upset because I wouldn't drink with her. I'm like, I'm not drinking with you. Remember, I don't do that. She goes, okay. And then she would have a glass of wine. But, even before we got started, and then you'd have a menu, and this was a particular restaurant that had like a menu that was like New York City phone book, and she would sit there and look through it. 45 minutes, half hour, we'd go through it. The waiter would come back twice. She would finish one glass of wine, order a second one, and not even order her food yet, where I'd look at it and I'd be ready to go within a few minutes. And she goes, well, can't we just talk? Okay, yeah, I may understand that, but we're not really sitting here talking. I'm sitting here watching you drink wine. And by the time she actually ordered, within 35, 45 minutes, she was on her third glass of wine. And you just sit there going, Amanda, either you're going to order or I think we need to leave. I remember having that conversation. He goes, well, you don't have to go there. I go, well, yeah, I do. You have no food in you, and you've had almost a bottle of wine, and we haven't even ordered food yet. And this type of conversation, it's not relaxing. It's not enjoyable. It's not intellectual. It's not emotionally stimulating for either one of us. It's agitation, frustration, and you begin to build animosity. And these are the kinds of emotions that are not good for any relationship. Sitting there simmering, okay, as an adult watching somebody drink, it is never a good situation to be in, especially if it's a special occasion, and that occasion gets destroyed because of the alcohol. Again, then she would finally order after this 35 or 45 minutes. And, and we're talking, it was a busy night. It's another half hour, 40 minutes before the food comes. And there goes another glass of wine. I said, you need to slow down. I remember having to go into the bathroom one time, coming back, and there's another full glass of wine sitting there already. Oh yeah, she came by and got another glass. I'm like, you're really starting to get a little bit like this is getting out of hand. This has nothing to do with food. It has everything to do with, this is an excuse for you to come drink. And I would explain that to her. And again, it would just be silence between us, and we would just sit there. Why people were having fun and laughing, all around us. You're sitting here going, why are we in this situation? Why are we here? Okay, why can't we even sit down and have one evening where we can just sit and have a normal meal? That's not possible when you have somebody who is a late stage alcoholic. When someone is has late stage alcohol use disorder, it's just simply not possible. And this particular incident that I'm talking about really also in its own right became a watershed. This is probably around 2018, probably a couple of years before she did pass away, unfortunately. And I realized that I was not going to do this anymore. I didn't care what the event was. I was not going to go out and give her an excuse to drink. And I came to that realization on this particular occasion. I think it was her birthday, a couple of years before she passed. And it's sad because there's nothing that can be normalized. Everything has got to center around the alcohol. It's the alcohol, it's the alcohol, it's the alcohol. In fact, they don't really want to eat food because when the food finally did come, she had about 3 bites and then asked for a doggy bag while she ordered another glass of wine. And the thing is, you don't want to eat food. I mean, in the alcoholic's mind, in my wife's mind, you don't want to eat food because it can interrupt your buzz, unfortunately. So you're really not there for the food. You're there because you have an excuse to get wine. And I know other families go through this. By the time we were getting up to leave, within probably, we'd been there a good 2 hours at that point, maybe 2.5, she was fairly inebriated. And I really had to, have her take my arm, and we had to walk out. And there was nothing that was relaxing or fun. It was a stress-filled, borderline irritated, horrible thing for me as a family member to the alcoholic. And I know family members go through this. Same type of thing when you have family events like Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, 4th of July. Any kind of event where family gets together, Mother's Day, Father's Day, all these things can take place where the alcohol takes precedence. And if everybody doesn't compromise and kind of cater to the alcoholic in their family, it can escalate into horrible scenes of anguish and frustration and maybe even words thrown that you might want to have. Okay, I mean, horrible situations, horrible escalation can happen. I know it happens in lots of families. It's important to realize when you recognize that this is going on in your family, I mean, it's time just to double down. You either got to figure out a way for that person to get healthy, or you're going to have to really create a separation from that person, because you can't want more for that person than they want for themselves. You didn't cause it, you didn't create it, and you're not going to solve it. And if you don't want to be around it, make the decision not to be around it. Again, this story and so many like it are in the memoirs called Amanda, A Cautionary Tale of Alcoholism. Again, you can click it on the link in the link tree. There's many ways to purchase it. You can go to my website. There's a PayPal button there. You can also, there's an international link. You can purchase this anywhere in the world. There's a specific link for that. You can also purchase it on Amazon. The ebook is also available on Amazon. It's on the Barnes & Noble website and the Apple website. And again, thanks so much for listening. Now, the biggest problem of all problems when you have an alcoholic in the family, coming from the vantage point of the family members, is when you go on vacation. So if you have an alcoholic in your family and you fly somewhere, maybe it's a family event, maybe it's a tourist place, it's a nightmare from beginning to end if you have an alcoholic in your family, because everything was going to center around getting alcohol, finding it, and really you end up becoming a babysitter, and it really generally the actual vacation is destroyed. It doesn't become a vacation, it becomes a stress-filled, anxiety-filled, anger-filled, animosity-filled event, one event after another. And if anybody's lived through this, they certainly understand that. I've told many stories of vacations, just flying back to New York with my wife. And one occasion, it starts before you're even getting there. So you get to the airport, and I got to have a drink at the bar before I get on the plane just to relax, because it's going to be a long plane ride. It's going to be 5 hours to Chicago and then on to New York, so I have to get a drink. So it starts there. And then when you get on the plane, sometimes they offer you a wine on the plane. Not as much as they used to, but I mean, for many, many years back when my wife was alive, we'd get on the plane and yeah, she'd have three wines on the plane, and you're just kind of going, oh my God, by the time we get there, by the time we go see my family or wherever we're getting to, she's going to be inebriated, and it's just stress, and just have to sit there and watch it. And then the general attitude from the alcoholic, certainly my wife, and this is not a unique situation, was, oh, just relax, we're on vacation. And if you have to hear that so many times, oh, it's okay because we're on vacation. And this certainly is not an angry rant. This is the reality of what families go through, and it's really very difficult. And for some people, it can really signify the end, because if you realize that you can't even relax as a family together, or with your spouse, or with the alcoholic, you realize the end is near. Because if there is no downtime ever, especially on a vacation, you realize that it's time for ultimatums, and it's time to change one's life in a different direction. Because if the vacation becomes a non-vacation, and you know what I'm talking about, it's not something that's sustainable. You can't sustain a relationship when there's no time for relaxing. I can remember one case with my wife, and I've told about it. We got kicked out of the house when my mother passed away because she had cleared out my dad's liquor cabinet, for example. And then we went down, I took my son and my wife, and we went to Gettysburg, and then we went on to Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., I can remember in the hotel room, we sat around and talked, and she swore that she wasn't going to drink anymore, and she's going to try and do better because she was embarrassed about the situation that happened in New York. We went out to dinner, of course, and she polished off a whole bottle of wine in front of us, and we were both just and I ended up leaving her at the hotel restaurant, and we went upstairs, and she came upstairs an hour later, all angry because we had left her. She actually had fallen asleep at the table, and the restaurant staff woke her up. I mean things like that. I just wasn't going to tolerate it anymore. And then that night she continued, and she fell down on the toilet and destroyed the toilet in the hotel room, flooding out the hotel room, until I was able to turn the water off. But there was probably 20 gallons of water that was seeping down the hallway. I had to call the hotel up. They gave us another room, but Amanda was too drunk, so we left her in the first room. She woke up the next day. I called her up, and she was screaming at me that we left her. I go, well, we couldn't move you because you were too inebriated. These are the kind of things, one event after another. Then my son and I wanted to go to the Smithsonian. We went to the Smithsonian for 2 hours, and somehow she had gotten alcohol. She wanted to stay in the car. We came back to the car after 2 hours. She wasn't answering text, and she was passed out in the front seat with her legs sticking out the side of the car. Apparently, she had hidden 2 bottles of wine in her suitcase. I guess I didn't think to look through her suitcase that morning. It never ended. And from there, I decided we had to cut that short, and we had to drive back. And we went through Gettysburg on the way home, and I had to buy her a bottle of wine so my son and I could just go spend a night and go get a ghost tour that night, so we wouldn't have to deal with her. And I let her drink and pass out by herself in the hotel room. So she was never really part of what my son and I were doing, which was having a vacation. So we had to placate my wife by either she was finding alcohol, we had just had to give it to her because we were fed up with the whole situation. One thing after another, and it never ended until we got home, and on and on. And again, these stories are not to disparage the alcoholic. This is from the vantage point of what the family goes through. And unless the person, the alcoholic, the person who's suffering from alcohol use disorder, is ready to work on their why and makes it their priority in their life and recognizes the destruction that they're doing to both themselves and to their family members, it's not sustainable. Because if the person's unwilling or unable to get help for themselves, as a family member, you can't make it your priority. You have to make yourself a priority after a while, because there's no point when the ship goes down, if it does, and hope it doesn't, but if it does go down, there's no point in everybody going down with it. At some point, you do need to get a life raft, and you do have to create ultimatums and boundaries and saying, if you drink, we're not going to be together, or there's got to be some other plan. You have to get into a detox rehab. You need to start going to AA. You need to start working on yourself physically and creatively. You need to get around different people and do different things. If you're not willing or able to do that, well, then the nature of this relationship is going to change. Those are the kind of conversations that one needs to have. That's what needs to change. If the person is unwilling to change, then you as the family member needs to change yourself in your role in the alcoholic's life. And when you're talking about a spousal relationship, believe me, I took it very seriously. My vows, for better, for worse, for richer or poor, that meant something to me, and I've always said that. And I did love my wife, but you do get to the point where richer, poor, for better, or worse doesn't mean you have to die with them. You don't have to go down emotionally and be sucked into this black hole of addiction and uncompromising behavior, destructive behavior that ruins you emotionally and psychologically. It can. And it goes beyond codependency. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about you. Sometimes you got to save yourself as a family member because it's hurting you financially, emotionally, psychologically, and it can physically as well. I mean, there's lots of people go through different variances of PTSD. I mean, I remember when my wife passed away, it was just the strangest thing. I remember a couple of weeks after, I bought a 6-pack of beer and I put it in the garage refrigerator. And I can remember driving home going, oh my God, I hope it's still there. You know, and I went home, walked in the garage, opened the garage refrigerator door, and the 6-pack was still there. And I went, oh God, duh. You know, I mean, because you have the same kind of anxiety that, oh my God, there's alcohol in the house. What was I thinking? When she was alive, when my wife was alive, I would have never considered having alcohol in the house because it would have been vaporized. I mean, any amount. It's just not something that you did. And it was one of those stresses as a family member that you just kind of have to be able to relax yourself. You can relax, okay? As sad as that is, you got to take your own life back as a family member. And I do hope that makes sense.